Hi, everyone. It's Larry Kotlikoff with Economics Matters, the podcast. I'm here with my friend Adam Penner. Adam is a kind of a serial entrepreneur. He's got a lot of different hats, but he's been working on a really important product in the period post-COVID that will potentially be approved by the FDA in short order and potentially save millions of lives down the road. Adam called me several years ago to see if I could be on a board of advisors to help him develop this product, or at least provide some kibitzing off and on. And I wouldn't say that I've done anything material in terms of the development of the product, but I've given him some advice, and I have a minor financial interest in how well this product succeeds, but it's really quite small. But I thought it would be really important to have, a discussion of how entrepreneurship and new product development occurs in our country. And I thought this was like a perfect example of how Americans can use our country's great, facility for coming up with new ideas, new inventions, new businesses, to illustrate how that actually works in practice, starting with nothing and getting to something. And that's something Adam's actually going to show us on this Zoom. But let me just start by saying that I'm going to let Adam describe his background. His bio is very long, but I'm going to let him talk us through most of it. But I'll just start out by saying that he went to Haverford College, one of the best, the elite liberal arts colleges in the country, studied political science. And then he earned an MA in International Economic Policy from the Elliott School of George Washington University. From there, he got involved in a whole variety of different endeavors. So, Adam, what happens after you graduate from GW? What's the next thing that happens? Welcome, by the way.
Thank you, Larry. I really appreciate you having me on, and that was a very nice introduction. A little humble. I think you've been an incredible resource throughout this entire project, and thrilled not only to get to work with you, but everybody else on our great board of advisors, world class. Well, after university, I had the opportunity to work very closely with the Honorable Roger Robinson Jr., who history buffs know as the gentleman that Ronald Reagan brought in to bankrupt the Soviet Union. Roger had realized that the Soviet Union had a bit of a shell game. In fact, he called it that in a Wall Street Journal article, in order to fund their global empire, and that they were very cash poor. So that led to the president bringing him in and designing a number of policies, very early on, economic policies to really quite literally win the Cold War, which, Larry, you remember at the time, no one thought was possible in the 1980s. And Roger and a small group of insiders within the Reagan administration were able to do just that. There's a long history there, but the short form is the day before Perestroika brought the wall down. As you know, they defaulted on their international debt, which is the equivalent of you or I declaring bankruptcy. So the policies didn't end up working. And Roger had started a boutique advisory firm, and I was brought on board first as his right-hand man, and then eventually worked my way up. And after 9/11, Roger and I started a company together that focused on how do we defund terrorism through a number of policy activities and really following the money. So my background is in national security. And in analyzing money movements, specifically as they relate to big ticket items. I did that for a number of years. According to public reports, over $50 billion came out of the coffers of Tehran and other terrorist sponsoring countries. It became a bit of a fanfare thing with Sudan, especially because of George Clooney and Leonardo DiCaprio, and a lot of stars became active in the campaign to defund terrorism through divestment. We see some of the echoes of that today, on university campuses, and very timely. Right now, folks calling for divestment and other ways to try to get their political points across. So we were fortunate to be on the front edge of that. And then following those activities, I went on to another, I guess you could say that you called me a serial entrepreneur. I really focus on big ticket items that have to do with the public good. So my next big activity was to bring to market a revolutionary pallet system that has the ability to save companies billions of dollars, and more importantly, from my perspective, to cut emissions globally by millions upon millions of metric tons. So climate change has become a big issue, and that was a real honor to work for that company as it developed. It's taken a little longer for the technology to take hold, and there are very big interests in the wood pallet industry and in the shipping industry on a global basis. But it was exciting, it was interesting, and it led me to today's discussion and today's opportunity, which is that my attorney for the company, which is called Green Ox Pallet Technology, was a gentleman by the name of Randy Roberts. And early on in COVID, I got a phone call from Randy saying, I need somebody to evaluate a technology. It's a back of the napkin right now, and tell me if this is worth pursuing. So about 2 months later, or actually about 2 weeks later, we had my our patent attorney on the phone, and she agreed that this was really something that the inventor Trevor Chandler had figured out in his own research. And we patented the technology in June of 2020 and formed a company, and the rest is history. So excited to talk about that journey today.
Okay, so this is what's called Mass Zero, and in a second I'll ask you to actually show everybody what's evolved as a result of, drawing something on a napkin, and then years later there's something physical that's being evaluated as we speak by the FDA for approval. But so let me just summarize. So you go to college, you go to grad school, and then you get a job, an opportunity to work I guess in a company that's consulting for the government, as opposed to inside the Department of Defense. So this was all working with the government, but not formally inside the government in that position, right? And then you move on to this more private company that's involved in developing a different type of palleting system that would be less carbon intensive. And then because you had these connections, I'm all about connections. I see in all these podcasts I've been doing with now about 85 people, when I talk to them about how they went from being a 6-pounder to, whatever they are actually doing, and how they went, usually their educations have very little to do where they end up exactly. You were a political scientist in college. That's what you studied, but you're not doing political science. You're doing entrepreneurship and public health in many ways. The person we just had on the podcast, Sophie Cranen, studied linguistics and ends up as a major restaurateur in Boston. And it's all because of kind of me bumping into people, meeting them, and making contacts. And as you said, you got a call about this potential invention, and you jumped on it. So tell us about that entire journey. Maybe you want to show us the mask to start with, so that people know there's something real here. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy to. We'll start at the end of the story. I did do some classified work for the government, by the way, but it was through a private sector entity. So you're right. People oftentimes say, did you work for the CIA? And the answer is no. But we did a lot of, I think, very important work, and it was meaningful. And we developed a doctorate in the world of entrepreneurship. So here's the mask, and it's called Mask Zero, as you noted. And I think it's a world-class product. We'll get into some of the ins and outs of it, but I do like to show people so they can get an idea that what goes into this from the very beginning, and some of the decisions that are made to go from what is quite literally a napkin when I first saw it to what you see in front of you right now, which, as you noted, it's a 550 plus page submission to the FDA.
And just so everybody's clear, this mask is not to be worn just for Halloween. This is to be worn if there's a pandemic or if there's a chemical attack or some kind of a biological attack against troops in the field. This is something that nurses and doctors and other medical staff can use in hospitals to stay safe while they're operating or treating or meeting patients. That's the goal here. And tell us about, just before we get into the kind of the evolution of this, the mask has some machinery inside it, which is I think it's UV light, right?
It is.
That are designed to, when particulates come into the mask that you're breathing, there's ways for air to get into the mask, and you have it on your head. But then as those particulates come in, they're being zapped by rays that are destroying the pathogens. And that's kind of the secret sauce of this, and why it's potentially so useful in so many applications. So is that a fair description of its ultimate goal?
I think it's a fantastic description. The technology that was created here is not new technology. We've known for 50 plus years that UVC can be used to kill virus. So it's nothing new. It's the adaptation of that technology into a wearable PPE device that, as you noted, can be used either in the event of a pandemic or what we call a fire extinguisher usage for it. But we've been very surprised by it as well, that some of the design decisions that we've made and some of the technical aspects of it are very much relevant to hospitals, to doctors, to nurses, to first responders, to potentially senior living facilities, et cetera, in a non-pandemic area as well, and have done a lot of market study around that as we've sought to develop the product. So we're excited to bring it to market. We think it has broad utility both here in the United States and then on a global basis as well. You said save millions of lives. I would say save tens of millions of lives, potentially, and even more in the event of another pandemic of the type that we saw, and one that could be a lot more lethal compared to the one that we lived through in 2020 and 2021.
And also, it would, a couple of things that I found fascinating when we started talking about this mask before it was even, anybody had even started to design it, let alone produce it, was that if you have a room full of COVID circulating, and you have this mask that has ultraviolet light that's killing the COVID or whatever it is, whatever pathogen we're talking about, then you're basically cleaning the room. You're cleaning the air for other people that might not have the mask, which to me is kind of fascinating. It's a way of kind of fighting back. And and had we had this and had people had access to it, we wouldn't have had to lock down the economy, because people could have gone to work with these masks while we're waiting to have a vaccine developed that would avoid needing to use the mask. But so that's a pretty cool thing. It's not just preventing disease, but killing disease.
Yeah, let me. How about a little tutorial? Would that help?
That would be helpful.
Okay, so yeah, let me show it, and then I'm going to pull up. Can I share my screen and pull up
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great. So when we first became involved in this, Trevor, you said take the fight. I mean, it really is about fighting back, right? We had an enemy invade our shores and kill 1 million people, is one way of looking at this, especially as I put on my national security hat, right? So what we wanted to design was an all-in-one mask plus face shield, where quite literally the only way, even if we forgot about the virus kill function right now, the only way that a pathogen could get in is through these little breathing holes, right? So really, it's a multi-layer defense. First, if someone sneezed at you, it wouldn't get through here, right? We have a sealed seal there. And then you have this design, which is not a zero pressure, right? But rather it is a seal that connects to the face. And a lot of it goes into the strapping. So the strapping pulls it tight to your face, but not so tight that you can't breathe or that you are uncomfortable. And the whole thing only weighs 1 pound, Larry. It's very lightweight, right? So we really focused on form, aesthetic, and comfort, because we realized people could be wearing this for 12-hour shifts. And there were already reports in 2020 of how much pain and challenge was coming from people wearing masks all day. And then what Trevor also wanted to do was he wanted to focus on the empathy piece of it, right? So if you're a patient and you're talking to a provider, right, now you can see my facial expressions, right? You can see, how in which I'm responding to you, and you can read lips if you need to as well. So, the technology is amazing. Within this chamber, as you said, there are UVC lights that are mounted that come on in intervals and kill virus, technically deactivate the RNA of the virus. And I'm going to show you how that works in a moment. But even before all that happens, the chances of a virus getting in there and past the N95 filter that's inside, and this is part of the patent and part of what we invented as well, is this filter carrier. So for virus to get inside that breathing hole and past that is almost impossible. To then get past having the UVC lights inside of here, shine on this and kill the DNA is almost impossible. And Trevor loves you for one reason, because you and he are about the only two people in the world who have really made this connection that, technically speaking, you could just put it onto a docking station and turn it on and you would be purifying the room, right? Because every time you're shooting out pure air that has no chance of being disinfected, it creates a purification system. We actually touched on that in the patent as well. So it's a really neat device, and one that I think has incredible meaning as we build out this multi-trillion-dollar global pandemic preparedness capability.
So that says, okay, so you guys, so you meet with Trevor, you talk to the patent, you get this connection, talk to a patent attorney, you meet with Trevor. You want to say a few words about Trevor? He's the inventor.
Yeah. I mean, Trevor's incredible. Trevor is actually one of the foremost AI software guys in the world, and he's developing programs and is already in pilot programs to look at ways in which AI can help be more effective in designing treatments for diseases. So we're really all in on the healthcare side. But Trevor, as a scientist, he'd be the first to say, hey, I needed somebody who could commercialize the technology. And then also, he doesn't have an expertise. He's not a virologist and doesn't have expertise in medical device. So we also, in addition to Trevor, we brought on Tasha Bond, who is a foremost expert in early stage medical devices and now serves as CEO of ERI Group in Golden, Colorado. And they are a medical device design and engineering firm. So she's been instrumental to this entire process, including the regulatory piece. And I mentioned you said connections, and I mentioned Randy Roberts. He's the fourth member of the team who has been central to gaining early stage funding for the product. We're about 4 years in, and obviously it's not inexpensive to design and go to regulatory process with a medical device. So Randy's been fantastic to work with, and I can't say enough about our investor base as well. They've helped us every step of the way. Every time we've hit a milestone, they've been there to say, okay, let's make sure we have enough fuel to get to the next marker.
So, okay, so just take us through kind of a chronology of events here. You you find out about this thing, you meet with Trevor, and then what are the next steps that you, as you're basically the, you're the CEO of this entity that's so yeah, walk us through. Here we go.
Yeah, let's go through the tape, right? So in 2020, we formed the company, filed the patents, and then we spent a tremendous amount of time and resources on the anthropometrics, right? It had to be perfect in terms of fit, form, and function, or it doesn't matter because nobody will wear it. So that was really the bulk of 2020. 2021, we head into R&D and prototyping. And then came the big moment for us where we proved that the kill chamber, as we call this area, where you, very importantly, we not only proved that it worked, but we proved that the UVC cannot escape the kill chamber, either to harm somebody on the other side of the mask, or equally important, to harm somebody who's wearing the mask. So that test has been performed on multiple occasions and obviously was incredibly important to the project, that we are applying UVC light, which directly could potentially cause harm at the right dosage, but we're doing it in a safe and effective manner. So once we proved that it both works and was safe, we were able to close our first seed round. And in 2022, we started to go into a bigger spend and really stand up the company. We were granted the utility patent in the United States and received an advanced industry award from Colorado, which is where the company is based. And by 2023, we were really starting to move into the regulatory process, which takes a little bit over a year. So you have to finish phase 2B, which is really the small batch run, to prove that you can manufacture it, prove that you can build it. And then you have to go through all of your tests again on steroids this time. So we did a couple $100,000 worth of testing. We did the market study. And we, very importantly, we went through a pre-submission process with the FDA. And I want to talk about this for a minute because I think it's important. A lot of people have FDA or other government horror stories, and that simply has not been my case, my experience. We spent the money and we went to the FDA and said, hey, this is what we have. It's a game changer. We know what we have. We want you to know what we have. We want you to help us design the regulatory process through which we submit this for your approval. So by doing that and spending those 4 or 5 months working directly with the FDA, and at one point they had 15 senior executives on a Zoom. So they were taking the technology very seriously, as you might expect. But it really gave us a clear blueprint on how we go through the rest of 2023 and 2024 from a testing and a proof and a building perspective, meaning building out the product in order to submit to the FDA. So as we head into 2024, you'll see that we're now starting to commercialize the technology. We submitted the formal FDA application on April 5th. We were assigned the reviewer, and we expect to have very significant feedback and any final steps that need to be taken by Q3 with FDA approval by Q4.
This year. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's amazing. The
Yeah.
all right, let me kind of return us. So maybe you want to turn off the screen there for a second.
Yeah.
And we can just talk
Well,
again.
hold on. Let me tell you how amazing that is, because this is I'm not a big chest beater, as you can tell. I try to be humble, and I feel like the technology found me, and that you said that it's funny how people connect and get to where they are. I've been very fortunate to be part of projects that I think do a lot of good for humankind, and that's meaningful to me. So I view myself as a steward for the technology, but I do want to say, it is incredibly important with small companies to be mindful of resources. And the average medical device in this country takes 6 years and $30 million to go from inception to FDA approval. And we're tracking for 4 years, so about 2/3 of that time, and we're tracking for about $3 million, so about 1/10 of the cost. So very proud of our team, and it's a meaningful thing, right? Because you have a lot of these startups who just have no idea the cost structure they're getting into. So it's really important to have that plan in place and to say to yourself, how do we do this on a cost-effective basis so that we're not burning through tens of millions of dollars, before which time we know that we have a product that is commercially viable and is FDA approved.
So Adam, when you talk about these different stages of, going from the napkin to to meeting with 15 FDA scientists who are talking to you about how best to present your submission, and then now it's being, has been submitted. For each of these steps, somebody had to make some connection, pick up the phone and get the 15 FDA guys or gals or people on the phone, on the horn, on the Zoom. How does that happen? You're not the head of 3M, right? You've got a,
No.
background, but you don't have the kind of long-term FDA connections. You never worked at the FDA. How does this come about? It takes a bit of chutzpah to think you can actually get this whole thing done, but you've never been anybody who kind of doubted that it could happen. From my conversations with you, it's never been, I hope we can get there. We're going to get there. And, what's the secret sauce, your secret sauce to getting getting into those doors, and also kind of maintaining the courage to go forward, and not being kind of consumed by self-doubt that this isn't going to work. This is an anxious adventure, right? This is like full of anxiety at each stage. Will I be able to get the funding for the next stage? And I've kind of listening to that anxiety along the way. It hasn't been that you've been perfectly calm, but on the other hand, compared to almost everybody I would can think of that I know, you've been super, confident that you could do it without being, arrogant or unrealistic. So what it is that, tell us, most people are going to fail at this kind of project, and it looks like you're going to succeed. And a very small number of great, people succeed. And it's important to understand where that is coming from, why that happens. I don't think it's just random luck.
Man, this could be a really long answer, but I'm going to try to be brief. Let me just put some statistics around it. 8 out of 10 medical devices fail, and the vast majority of those, or not the vast majority, but the majority of those are due to funding shortfalls. So I do want to point out to your viewers that I do have a concern, having gone through this process, about long-term medical innovation in this country, because it's become cost prohibitive. $30 million is cost prohibitive for entrepreneurs, right? And for investors. So really, you're leaving innovation now up to either major universities or to private equity groups, and really the 3Ms of the world. So that is a big concern of mine, because you want a very lively exchange in the marketplace of ideas around technologies that are early stage and have some viability. So all that to say that in my case, the way that we dealt with that is twofold. At a personal level, I over the years have really spent a lot of time focusing on the marathon versus a sprint. At a personal level, I try to hike every day. I try to make sure I drink my water and wake up and have a good breakfast. And focus on the things that I can control. So, I'm very much about winning today and meeting the next marker and moving things forward. So we're a milestone-driven company. The confidence came from the science. We had no doubt that the technology would work. And if we hired the right people, that we would end up with a device that we could have some confidence in. You're right. It's always white knuckle. It's white knuckle now. We're still fundraising, right? We're still, we're trying to figure out how to go the next step now that we've hit all the milestones that we've hit. And, that's a bit of a constant battle. But again, I think at some point you have to let the work and the accomplishments speak for themselves, and to trust that the market's going to respond to that, and it does respond and support good activity. So in a nutshell, I would say certainly you're going to lose the game if you're getting too caught up in any day-to-day event. And I think it's why all the baseball players always say that they're focused on today's game, not what happens over the next week or the next month, right? We just have to focus on what's in front of us, and it's a platitude, but it's one that I think is germane to this conversation as well.
So how do you actually get the 15 FDA scientists together in a Zoom? I mean, how does that happen?
You pay, quite literally. So there's a process called the pre-submission process, and we had to make a decision as a company. Costs about $30,000, and you're effectively giving them everything that you have up until that point, and say, hey, we're getting pretty close here. We're about 6 months to a year away from submitting fully, and we'd like your feedback right now. We'd like you to be part of the process rather than getting this cold in about a year. And it was extraordinarily important to us. I mean, again, penny wise, pound foolish. We could have used that $30,000 for other things, for sure, as a startup. But for us, what it told us is exactly what we have here, which is a new category. So we didn't know at that point until the FDA came back to us and said, this is a de novo advice, quite literally new, and there is no predicate device in the world. So that meant a different submission process, whereby at the end of the de novo medical device process, or a class 2 medical device, this will become a new product category. And why that's important is twofold. If we would have given it to the FDA without knowing that, it would have created a multi-month event where they're reviewing it, coming back to us, and we have to resubmit. So we would have lost months upon months upon months. And the second reason it's important is protecting intellectual property. As a de novo product, we obviously have something that according to the FDA, there's no such thing in the world. So by definition, anybody else who comes along and tries to develop a product like this is going to be tripping our intellectual property.
I got it. And who actually made the contact with who did you didn't know ahead of time that the FDA had this process, or did you?
I did not. So again, smart hire, right? So Tasha has been our chief operating officer. She's taken 12 medical devices from inception through FDA approval. We really, part of my job was to make sure that I got out of her way, right? When it came to the regulatory process and the engineering process. I trust Tasha fully. And we sat down about a year ago. Actually, it was almost exactly a year ago at the Life Science International Conference down in Dana Point. And we said, okay, here's our choice. Do we do it or we don't do it on the pre-sub? Here's the pros, here's the cons. We made the decision on the spot. I went back and got the resources I needed to get. Tasha then went through the pre-submission process, and I wouldn't say she really got the 15 people on the phone. I think my take on it is, once the FDA realized what exactly we're saying here, that we have the world's only device that kills virus, it doesn't just protect or create a barrier against it, it kills virus. I'm sure they take all submissions seriously, but this one strikes me as a pretty serious submission.
You're saying they really got excited and everybody wanted to come on the Zoom, probably.
I mean, you wouldn't have known it from their stone faces. They were very businesslike and whatnot. But yes, I think everybody realizes, and I certainly do, and I know you do as well, that this is a special technology and one that has a meaningful potential application on a global basis.
So one quick question. This is rechargeable. How do you charge up the ultraviolet so that it can be used, day after day?
Yeah. Can I show you the exploded view? I think it's really helpful for people to be able to see what this looks like in diagram form with the various pieces.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's do it. So first, I want to go back to just quickly what we're dealing with in the market. We saw this as non-viable in any
Wait,
sort of
your
environment.
screen hasn't come up yet. Hang on.
Okay.
Can you pull it up, your screen?
Yeah, let me just share again. Sorry about that.
Yep.
All right. Tell me if we're online.
Yep, here we go.
Okay. So this is not viable, right? And this is not protective enough. So what we saw was a major market gap here that we went to fill. Even if you don't have the virus kill technology, you can see this woman's wearing a version of our mask that doesn't include that, because we think it's the world's best N95 mask that allows for providers and patients to communicate with each other, even if you don't have the virus kill function. So here are a couple of the other things we saw in the marketplace, full face respirators, right? PAPR suits that need to be cleaned like this and cost thousands of dollars. So again, we really saw an opportunity in the market and are focused on executing on that opportunity. So let me blow this up a little bit. So you can see here we have the frame and the filter cartridge. We have a PCBA board, and within here is the secret sauce, which is the LED lights. The lens has a special anti-fog coating. The seal we talked about that does not create zero pressure, but like a respirator. So you don't need a battery pack, but rather it pulls it close to your face so that virus can't come in through these linkages right here. And then you asked about where are we on the iteration. So right now, we originally thought to ourselves, let's start with a product in the event that we're off grid. So we started with AA batteries, and that goes in at the top of the mask. And I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to show you the mask again, because I think that's more, people now have the idea. So at the top of the mask is where the batteries fit into it. So it's AA batteries. And then you can see the electronics down here, the various indicators. Within here is the electronics cartridge. It's very low technology, right? As I say, the secret sauce is what LEDs are we using? How far away are we placing them? And then the patents around the entire fact that we're killing virus in a contained manner using a full face design. So the next step for the company, and this is where you talked about fundraising. So we are at a situation right now where, as a company, we have low burn operational capability in place until the end of the year, right? We're in the process of closing our seed round. We've raised $2.5 million plus the grant, so just under $3 million. And now we're starting to say to ourselves, what do we do? So here's an interesting moment as a business person, right? And maybe you have some advice for me. I'll take it if you've got it. We've got two choices, right?
Yep.
Choice number one is to take our time over the next several months and to start having conversations with the 3Ms of the world and others, and start to what we call socialize the technology, right? Among companies that might buy it and have the resources to make millions upon millions. Because if we're being honest, this guy and a couple of folks out in Colorado are not going to build millions upon millions of masks. And that's what the world needs. So that's choice number one. Choice number two, and I think this is the one we're leaning towards, is a pre-Series A fundraise. So a Series A, as you know, is usually a private equity group or a venture capital firm, but they're looking for EBITDA. And we don't have that because we are not allowed to sell this until the FDA says we can. So, we'll look at this and we'll think to ourselves, maybe we raise a couple $1 million and then we get more aggressive. And all of this goes back to your question around batteries. So if we had a couple $1 million right now as a company, what would we do? We would iterate the technology right now while we have the team in place and we know what we're doing. And we would immediately add the Bluetooth capability, because you can hear through it, but we want it to be perfect, right? And Bluetooth is an obvious addition to the technology. And the second is that we go from, we keep the batteries because we might still be off grid, but we simply add the port, the electricity port capability, right? So, and we probably also add the docking station so that it's always charged and ready to go. Because one thing we have here is, and this is very interesting, is the market has told us that it's interested in using this outside of a pandemic. Why? Because we spent the money on a market study that evaluated 27 hospitals around the world, and that doesn't include the one you've evaluated up in Boston. And I know you've had some very good conversations with folks. And the feedback is people are interested in this as a replacement to respirators and fit test required N95 masks and other answers that are currently being used day to day in the hospitals. So we really do think that between the two choices, it's time to iterate, and it's time to really start pushing this technology forward. And in order to do that, we'll have to go through another fundraising round.
So the first choice is go right to the 3Ms of the world. The second choice is to raise more money, add some additional features, and then go to the 3Ms, or then
Right.
do what? Go back to maybe the U.S. government, to the hospital, some medical. I guess, or in the end, you need a medical device producer that's large scale. Either
you do in the end. There's a middle step, which is we can produce up to 50 to 75,000 units of these. So we could do a 10,000 unit run and start to prove it within 5 to 7 hospitals and go through the hospital VAC committee, what's called the VAC committee process. And I think that if we went to, as we go to the 3Ms, because I think we will start to socialize the technology. And as you know, we just signed an NDA with one of the biggest healthcare companies in the country. And we're open for business. So, we're reaching out to people, and we're going to have all the conversations. But I do think that to answer your question, yes, with more funding in the door, we would, number one, iterate. Number two, start going through the hospital evaluation process. Number three, start reaching out to the states and the federal government, again, so that people are aware of this in the pandemic preparedness community. And the fourth is one that we're already pursuing, which is to start talking about licensing to government or major corporations in countries where the patent has already been issued. So that's South Korea, it's Israel, it's Australia. We may or may not ever be involved in the prosecution of this in the United States market. We certainly will not be involved in the Australian market. So for all your listeners over in Australia, I know there's a major medical device company over there, and they're welcome to reach out to us.
I said, why not Australia?
Well, simply because a small company like ours is, as a one product medical device company, is almost impossible, right? I mean, the natural step evolution is to take it to a certain level, and then to sell the technology or license the technology to a major. And we have about 25 prospects that are obvious. The 3M comes to mind, Owens and Minor, Danaher. And then even some ones that are less obvious, like Visor, which bought a cough app and is really starting to pay attention to. This is a multi-trillion-dollar market, preparedness. I mean, you remember what happened after 9/11. We spent trillions of dollars on national security. To think we're not going to spend trillions of dollars on pandemic preparedness is, you're sleepwalking if you're not paying attention to that. So, for us, it's really about taking more aggressive steps towards commercialization that allow us to build the case, because that's what you're ultimately always doing when you sit down with the 3Ms. It's not me in a room with the CEO of 3M. It's the analysts at 3M looking at our 550-page FDA submission, right? Yeah. So that's what they're going to be doing, and in the meantime, we'll focus on the licensing piece and the outreach piece.
Is this also, at some points we were talking about the military use of this in as I guess masks that could be used in the field if there's biological warfare. Is that something that you still feel is a viable market for this mask?
I think almost regrettably, I would say 100%. I think it's a slow market. The military is rarely on the front edge, especially when it comes to medical device. I think there's going to be adoption in foreign countries before there is in the United States. And you think about a South Korea, which is in constant danger, right? And has that wall that they're dealing with. I had lunch recently with Roger, who I mentioned earlier, and he's arguably, one of the 3 or 4 foremost national security experts in the world. Depends on who you talk to. I think he's the foremost. And, we were talking about the mask, and I said, remember after 9/11 when we went, you wanted to go and buy gas masks? And he said, yeah, and I said, well, look, this is serious, right? I said, a pandemic can happen. We don't know when it's going to happen. It can happen at any time. The Spanish flu took out 50 to 100 million people. The Black Plague did its thing. And there's no promise that we are going to be able to get a vaccine as quickly as we did this last time. So pandemic preparedness is important. But I looked at Roger and I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you have a choice between developing a dirty nuclear weapon and developing a viral attack to come after Israel or the United States or South Korea, what's easier and less expensive? And he said that there is a high degree, too high a degree of a viral attack on an ally country in the next 5 to 10 years. I think the playbook was too obvious, Larry. I mean, 1 million dead and trillions of dollars and the whole country shut down. If you're somebody who really doesn't like us, I don't think that you're focused as much on nuclear these days as you're focused on being in the lab trying to develop that virus.
Thanks. Well, that's
I'm sorry. I don't want people to sleep badly at night, but the reality is, let's go back to the math for a second. The reality is that does have a day-to-day use, but I think what we're really talking about, it's a defense mechanism. And certainly as I talk to Israel and other countries that, take these things very, very seriously, I think that's the conversation I'm having with them.
cool. Well, listen, I think that's a good place for us to bring this to a close. This has been really fascinating. I think it's really a lesson about American entrepreneurship, how you can make things happen, how connections matter, but the connections don't happen just accidentally. You have to kind of make those connections and also know to bring people in who are experts where you don't have the expertise, realizing that you can't do everything, but also, I guess, you have connections in fundraising and the ability to fundraise and also clearly explain the process. And you pulled it all together, Adam, and best of luck in this continued exciting endeavor. I think it's critically important, and you're doing a great service to the country and mankind. So bless your heart, really.
Larry, thank you so much for having me on board. I really enjoyed the chat, and encourage people to look us up, and we're always here. Like I said, we're going to keep grinding away here.
Do you want to just, that's the best way? What's the name of the company, the best way to contact you and so forth?
Yeah, the name of the company is Mass Zero. And the easiest way to reach out to us is we're a small enough company that it's just adam@masszero.us. So welcome some emails and look forward to hearing what your viewers think about this.
That's great. Okay. Thanks again, Adam. Take care.
Okay. Thanks, Larry. Take care.